Or maybe he sits next to Brian, I don't know.
Who's going to do the Tappan? Is it you?
Brian,
Brian.
said you want him to do it, just do it.
I guess it's a little bit late to ask, right? If we're not, fine. Yeah, that's right. How does it come out at the end? Okay, thank you all very much. One of the really high-profile projects that we have been working on as an administration, and as you've heard me say before, is in many ways a metaphor for what we've been trying to do, is the Tappan Zee Bridge project. And we have a presentation on that now that is very important, and we've all been waiting with bated breath. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian Coneybear to take us through a Tappan Zee presentation.
Thank you, Governor Cuomo, and thank you for your leadership on this very important project. We're talking today about building a new New York bridge. And today, another milestone for you. The Thruway Authority is presenting to the administration, and to all New Yorkers for that matter, a public preview of the bridge designs. By taking control of the project, Governor Cuomo ended more than a decade of delay. Under the old broken process, there were more than 10 years of study and talk, some $88 million spent, but nothing really accomplished. Now, at the governor's urging, the White House agreed to fast-track the project in October of 2011, and more progress was made in less than a year than was made in over a decade, including the project getting its final environmental approval from the federal government in September of this year. Now, from the beginning, we have worked to bring the public into this process. Since late July, we've held more than 80 community meetings with over 1,000 people in attendance. Hundreds of emails and phone calls from the public have been returned within 24 to 48 hours of receiving them. And this preview of the three bridge designs before the Thruway Authority Board votes on a final proposal continues our commitment to transparency. This entire procurement process was overseen by strict federal guidelines ensuring competition. 3 proposals totaling 750,000 pages were submitted this summer. Those are the actual bid documents on pallets right there. They underwent a detailed technical review for feasibility, and then a second review to determine which one presents the best value for the state. The Thruway Authority Board will make the final decision on which of these 3 proposals to go with on December 17th. And now here's what everyone's been waiting for. These are the conceptual bridge images for all 3 proposals. These designs are preliminary and they are subject to change when it comes to things like lighting, color, texture, landscaping, and other aesthetic features. We're going to present these renderings anonymously because of the Thruway Authority's procurement process. Now, proposal number 1 on the left comes in at $3.142 billion. That is the price tag. Proposal number 2 is priced at $3.99 billion, and proposal number 3 came in at $4.059 billion. We're going to see all 3 of these proposals from the same basic viewpoints that were required in the request for proposals that went out. So let's start with a closer look at proposal number 1. Here's the view from the Hudson River shoreline in Westchester County. Again, this is a conceptual rendering of what proposal 1 would look like. This is a view from above, looking at the span from Rockland toward Westchester. And this is a view from the Rockland shoreline with the main span out in the distance. And the final image for proposal number 1, the look of the bridge at night with the proposed lighting design illuminated. So a few more details on proposal number 1. Again, it has a price tag of $3.142 billion. Under the proposal, construction would take 5 years, 2.5 months to complete. It is mass transit ready for the future. It meets all the environmental standards and requirements in the FEIS, and it would involve dredging approximately 951,000 cubic yards of the Hudson River bottom to make way for construction equipment. So let's take a closer look at proposal number 2 here, starting with that same conceptual image from the Westchester shoreline. Here is the overhead view on proposal 2. This one, again, from the Rockland shoreline. And finally, the view of proposal number 2, the bridge at night. So, the details on proposal number 2. The price again, $3.99 billion. Construction would take 5 years, 11 and a half months. It is mass transit ready, and it meets all the environmental standards required in the FEIS. It would require approximately 1.8 million cubic yards of dredging. On to proposal number 3, again starting with the view from Westchester. This is the look from above. And from the Rockland shoreline once again. And we finish with the bridge at night. So the details on proposal number 3. The price again, $4.059 billion. The construction would take 5 years and 11 months. It would be mass transit ready with some extra costs. It meets all the environmental standards in the FEIS, and it would require about 1.55 million cubic yards of dredging. Now, the governor's plan has always been to find the best value for New Yorkers in this project, and the design-build law he signed is already showing some results. The proposal options offer potential savings of up to $1 billion versus earlier projections on this project. And under the design-build law, the bridge contractor will pay for most cost overruns during construction. And one note that's very important, the proposal prices are not the total cost of this project. There are additional costs that go above and beyond that. They could total between $600 and $800 million to cover things like project management, oversight, contingencies, and aesthetic improvements over the course of the construction project. Now, the RFP specifically required a selection committee to make a non-binding advisory recommendation to the Thruway Authority Board. And this committee has now recommended proposal number 1. The Thruway Authority will now review the proposals, consider all input, and make the final selection. So the next step is to build a new New York bridge. The Thruway Authority will consider the recommendation of the selection committee to award the contract this month, again December 17th. The contract will then be reviewed and finalized, and construction activity can begin after the first of the year. 2013, we should be breaking ground on a new New York bridge. This presentation and all the conceptual images you just saw are being posted on our website, newnewyorkbridge.com. Thank you all for your time, and Governor Cuomo, thank you for your vision and your dedication to this historic project.
Thank you. Well done. Let's talk about this a little bit. First, to Brian, who you know we made an honest man out of Brian. He was a reporter before he came to us. But Brian has been really a godsend because he has communicated this project to a very skeptical audience, numerous audiences, and just the communication itself, just talking, understanding, being available has been fantastic. Tom Madison and Joan have been masterful the way they've shepherded this program. This project, you know, we tend to be aggressive in general to make government work. This project was pushed, managed, cajoled every step of the way. There was almost at every interval, what we were trying to do was impossible. And the first half of the meeting would be why we can't possibly accomplish what we were about to try to accomplish. And then the second half was actually trying to figure out how. So to make this much progress on building a bridge in a year, it can take a year to buy a new desk in this place, to get a bridge to this point in a year really was just a fantastic, fantastic accomplishment. And it's now going to be used as the model of, see, if we can do this in a year, this is what you're going to hear from me for the rest of the administration. I want you to know, if we could get this done in a year, why can't we get this done in a year? See, it's going to be a powerful precedent, but they did a really, really great job. There was a selection advisory board that reviewed this as part of the procurement. They make a recommendation to the Thruway Authority Board. Their recommendation is non-binding. It's just that. It's a recommendation. Thruway Authority Board actually makes the decision at the December 17th meeting. Correct. The Selection Advisory Board recommends proposal number 1. And do they say why they picked number 1? I mean, the price is obviously lower.
They determined it represented the best value. Under the best value definition, price is actually half of that equation, but other things like bridge design, its lifespan, technical engineering, its public outreach, the entire plan is weighed on several different areas, but price is 50% of the best value equation.
And the price is much lower on that bridge, close to $1 billion or so.
Correct. The original estimates were in the $5.2 billion range. This came in at 3.142.
Great. Larry, Howard, do you want to add anything on this?
I just think, looking, Governor, at the proposal, one of the other things when you look at proposal 1 versus 2 and 3 is the disturbance to the Hudson River. The amount of dredging that would be required is half of what basically the other proposals do and half of what was in, I believe, the EIS. So I think at least on the face of it, looking at proposal 1 has environmental benefits to it that far exceed the other 2 proposals. I think that's one of the reasons why the selection committee recommended proposal 1 in addition to price and other factors.
That's a very big deal, the dredging. The environmental groups, especially the river environmental groups, will find it very attractive that it does less dredging. What do we think? Comments? Joan? Karen? What do we think, guys?
It's a great project.
Well, as a toll payer and a taxpayer, the bridge, I like proposal number 1.
Best looking and most cost
I
effective.
think it looks beautiful, and I love the price. And it will be built faster than the other 2 proposals.
6 months left. Construction schedule, environmental effects, those were all taken into consideration in best value.
And Governor, I think it's worth noting with your leadership that this is ahead of every other project in the country. If you look at what you started last October and everything that was accomplished in that year, with your leadership and all the folks that worked to meet the goals that you set.
Well done. Well done. Next step is we have to find out about the TIFIA loan.
Yes, we are still working with the U.S. Department of Transportation, exchanging documents and working on finding out exactly how much money might be available through the TIFIA program.
Now, we're going to make these designs public. They'll be on websites.
Should already be on newnewyorkbridge.com right now. I believe they will be on the Thruway Authority website as well. This has been streamed, I believe, live over the internet, so we're getting the word out there.
People can comment on which design they like best.
Absolutely. Send comments. You can submit a comment at newnewyorkbridge.com. We will collate them and take them all into consideration and take them to the Thruway Authority Board.
Great. Really well done.
Thank you, sir.
Let's give the team another round of applause. Well done. Howard Glazer is going to speak, give us an update on Hurricane Sandy recovery.
Thank you, Governor. This is our first cabinet meeting since the storm hit New York State. I say that although in truth virtually the entire cabinet was deployed at first throughout the state, because not knowing precisely where the impacts of the storm would be. Many of you were in different areas of the state. And then ultimately, once the full brunt of the storm was felt in the downstate region, I think almost all of you participated during our initial response, and then since then in our recovery effort, a recovery effort which is going to be ongoing for a very, very long period of time and is now part of the mission, I think, of each one of our agencies. To give you a quick recap of where we are right now, you cannot overstate the impact of this storm to the state of New York. Some of the numbers you see here, as of a couple of days ago, almost a quarter of a million people have registered for individual assistance with FEMA. We have 305,000 homes with insurance claims in the New York region. We know that over a quarter of a million businesses were affected. We had an unemployment spike of 46,000 in that first week, which is triple or so of what you might expect. And you know about the rest of it. This has never happened before in a major metropolitan area. The transportation system shutting down. The fuel system, supply chain, shutting down. The power grid going down, all at the same time. On top of that, the effects of wind and water on housing and people's lives, 60 fatalities in New York State alone. So you have this environmental disaster on top of that, wastewater treatment plants, sewer plants, and the changing of the coastline itself. All of that happening at one time to a region that is an economic driver, not just for the state, but for the nation. About 10% of all employment in the nation is New York State and New Jersey. 11% of the gross domestic product is New York and New Jersey. It shut down for a week or more. So the impact on people's lives, the impact on the economy, this may be receding momentarily from the headlines, but the effect is going to be there for some time. We're focusing now really on two fronts. The first is the continuing recovery, and we're working closely with our FEMA partners, with our local government partners, and with all of you, and you'll continue to hear from us on that. And what I want to emphasize to you today is that this remains a major objective for each one of your agencies and your senior staff and indeed yourselves. We're working in the areas of housing, insurance, transportation systems, putting the environmental systems back in place. All of these areas and businesses are the immediate focus. Secondly, long-term, the governor has appointed 3 commissions, some of you are participating in, to review the state's capacity and systems for emergency preparation, for response, and longer term for infrastructure and the way that we build our state and build our coastlines, prepare our homes and our businesses for the long term because of the increasing frequency of extreme weather that we are seeing. So both of those efforts are taking place on 2 different tracks. We need to fix now what's broken, put people's homes and lives back, and the state will continue to play that role, as well as ensure that we're better prepared to respond in the future. We're better built to prevent these kinds of problems in the future as well. Thematically, you'll see a lot of that here in the government over the coming months and even, I think, years.
Well said. Any questions on this? Comments? Again, thank all of you for a really extraordinary effort. And as Howard said, unfortunately, this is going to go on a while. And you're going to see people are going to have to work through it. There's almost a psychology to this. You know, they're almost in post-traumatic position. The initial instinct is it happens fast, it's going to be over fast. It's now settling into people that this is going to be a long slog. Rebuilding is not fast. Rebuilding the tapestry of the community is not fast. But we will be there for the long term. Okay, any questions from the press?
Governor, on Sandy, there was a report that the White House is going to come out with a proposal for $50 billion for the region. You were looking for $42 billion for New York alone. What's your reaction? And have you been informed by the White House of what they're doing?
You know, Ken, I saw that story. I believe the White House has said that was premature. So I will wait to find out exactly what they are saying. We stated a need for the state of New York at about $42 billion. New Jersey had about $37 billion or so, $38 billion. So the need, as we define it, is about close to $80 billion. I know that's a lot of money. I understand the fiscal situation. But that is the need, and we're looking to meet the need. But I haven't heard what the White House proposal is, or what the Senate's proposal is, or what the proposal from Speaker Boehner is. I spoke with all of them when I was down there earlier this week. They all said they wanted to be cooperative, but we'll wait and see what they actually do.
What do you think it would mean, though, if it came in that short, $50 billion for the region? What would that mean for New York, or what would your feeling be about that? What would we be able to do?
Well, you'd have to know what was in the $50 billion. You know, what did it represent? And is that the end of it, or is that the first step? So let's find out exactly what they're saying. And then we have to find out what the Senate is saying and what the House is saying. You know, this is just the proposal from the White House. This is like the governor sending up a program bill. You know, totally pointless sometimes.
Governor, do you anticipate on December 17th, when the Thruway Board considers these bids, that they'll also consider a toll increase on commercial vehicles?
I don't know. That is up to them. I've made my position very clear. I said yesterday to a reporter who said, well, you know, maybe what's going on with the Thruway and the decision on the toll. I said, I don't think there's any mystery. It's a tough situation for the Thruway. Their position is that they need additional revenues. They're under pressure from the bond underwriters, and their bond rating is very, very important to this state. It's important to the Tappan project. It's important to every citizen in this state. They need to make ends meet. The obvious and easy way is always a toll increase. There hasn't been a toll increase in a long time on the Thruway. I understand that, but I also understand that that has been the story of the past 2 years here, right? That's every conversation we've had in this room. Well, we have a deficit, and we have to make up the deficit, and the easy way to make up the deficit is to raise taxes, or for the Thruway, raise tolls. And that is the last resort, in my book. It sends the wrong signal, so I have told them, go back and come up with other options and find other ways. And that is the last resort, and I don't think you go to the last resort until you have proven that there is no other viable option, and I don't believe they've gone through that process yet.
Mr. Madison, if there are plans to take up the toll increase on December 17th?
That decision hasn't been made yet. As the governor indicated, we've heard from the governor, we've heard at the toll hearings around the state loud and clear from our customers, from the business community, from the legislature. And so we're exploring every possible alternative to the commercial adjustment that has been widely publicized and that's been on the table. We're looking at alternatives. We'll continue to review those. At the staff level, our board continues to deliberate on other options. And part of the story that hasn't been widely publicized is we have taken a hard look and continue to do so internally as an organization. We've cut our capital construction program by $300 million. We've cut about $25 million in operating expenses in 2012 alone, and we're on a trajectory to cut an additional $100 million over the next several years. We're streamlining the way that our work gets done internally and trying to get our house in order at the same time as we're exploring alternatives to this proposed toll adjustment.
Thank you.
Governor, at this point, what would your ideas be for the major funding in order to build this bridge? Do you have some ideas?
Next big question, Betty, is what federal assistance do we get? And that's what we refer to the TIFIA loan. We've requested a very large loan from the federal government to build the bridge. We are waiting to see if we're granted that loan. If so, how large a loan? And that is the big question mark right now. We needed to know how much the cost of the bridge was. We now have an idea of the cost of the bridge, depends on which bridge the Thruway Authority ultimately picks. But you know what the cost is. Next question is the size of the TIFIA loan.
Would you consider selling bonds in order to finance the construction of this
Part of it
bridge?
could be bond financed.
When you were dealing with the daily pricings in Sandy, how well do you think the state had prepared over previous administrations, going back 10, 15 years or more, for this eventuality? Because there had been warnings about this sort of thing happening.
Not well enough.
Did they not heed the warnings?
I don't know that anyone believed it, Mike. I don't know that anyone believed it. You know, we had never seen a storm like this. So it's very hard to anticipate something that you have never experienced. So yeah, there were some people who said, you know, there's a possibility of extreme weather, global warming, climate change. But we had never seen anything like this before.
With Sandy and the cost that it's taking, does that change? Does that actually, maybe, for a bad word, but does it help the argument to tell the public that they need to be open to expansion of casino gambling, even fracking, any of these measures that would bring in more revenue?
Well, two things. I don't see that connection. The first question is going to be, do we get anything from the federal government in terms of the supplemental? And if so, what? And how much of the cost of the storm does that cover? That is the number one source for funding for the damage of the storm. We have not even begun to cross the bridge, pardon the pun. If you don't get enough from the federal government, then what would you need to do to generate revenues to pay for the storm? We haven't considered that.
Governor, one of your very own has been mentioned as a possibility for mayor. Joe Loda is here today. Is that something you
You're coming to one of my daughters for a second, my very own. Got me really nervous.
Have you discussed it with Mr. Loda, and would you like to see him run?
I would like to see Mr. Loda do what Mr. Loda wants to do. He has done an extraordinary job as head of the MTA. The entire region got to see that during the storm at Sandy. I knew how well he was performing, but they actually saw the performance. So whatever he would like to do, I think he should do. And I admire that he enjoys public service. I would caution him on elected office, however, because it is a nasty process to go through.
If he got in, you think you'd endorse him, even though Republican?
I'm going to try to stay out of the politics of New York City if I can avoid it.
You don't expect to make any endorsement then?
I'm not expecting to, no.
Governor, as part of the request you put into the federal government for Sandy recovery funds, you've asked for flood mitigation money. That money doesn't, those funds, those particular funds don't come through. What other options might you have to?
Well, I'm making the case that Mike was suggesting in his argument on the mitigation. You know, there is now a new awareness and appreciation that these extreme storms are not once in a lifetime. And people now expect them actually to recur. There was some poll, I don't know whose poll it was, but the past few days, a very high percentage of people surprised me. People who said they believe you're going to have another storm like a Storm Sandy. And that makes sense, right? It was Irene, it was Lee, it was now Sandy. So I think people really do believe something different is going on with the climate, call it climate change, without a political argument, but they get these extreme weather patterns are more frequent. Once you accept that, and you understand that the cost of this storm is going to be about $40 billion, why wouldn't you do mitigation to reduce the cost when this recurs, if you at the same time believe there's a high likelihood that it will recur? And that's why we're talking about mitigation now, because unless you want to spend, $40 billion every time this happens, and go through a terrible period of economic disruption and personal pain, why wouldn't you spend some money to save more money down the road? And that's what mitigation is about.
In an opinion piece to be published tomorrow by my own esteemed newspaper.
Who authored it first?
You did, I believe.
Was it well written? Certain poetic flair?
Certainly than anything I've ever written. You said, I believe, help me with the quotes, but you said that the Senate Democrats squandered their opportunity in 2008, 2009, and that their dysfunction was, quote, legendary. I'm wondering, who do you hold responsible for that? Malcolm Smith and Jeff Kline, the leaders of the conference in 2009, or someone like John Sampson, who then took the reins of the conference?
You know, I don't get into, I don't think it's important to figure out who or why or how. But I think it's almost inarguable, as close to inarguable as any premise is in this building, that was not a good period of government. That label of dysfunction, all the shenanigans that went on, it was not a good period. Now, I also say, you pick one quote out of my piece. You don't like when I pick a quote, selected quote out of your piece. I also said the Republicans also squandered the opportunity when they ran the Senate. So what I was trying to say in the piece was the politics goes back a long period of time. There are negative characteristics of the last Democratic leadership, there's no doubt. There are also negative characteristics of Republican leadership, which frankly go back decades. And I was disappointed in the Republican leadership last year that they didn't take up minimum wage, campaign finance, et cetera, which I thought were necessary, which were popular. So basically I was saying there are issues on both sides, is what the piece was saying.
You mentioned the litmus test, which included many issues. Not included, though, was anything regarding chamber operations, things that good government groups have long called for, like equitable access to move bills to the floor, equitable distribution of resources, both in terms of staff and if there were member item funding among legislators. Do you want to see any of these things, and will that at all factor into who you're most inclined to have lead the Senate?
You know, Jimmy, my focus is, I said first, the functioning of the Senate in terms of just proper functioning, just that it works well, they take up bills, there's debate, there are votes, little things like that, that the body functions is important. And then second, how they actually vote on the important issues. Your point, first, if they vote on the important issues, if a bill actually comes to the floor, but then how they vote. And here are the issues that I believe are the important issues. And those two questions, how does it function? Some people say, well, it can't, it'll be bifurcated. Who knows? How well it functions. And second, how they vote on the issues that are important. And I want to wait to get the data, the information on both of those things. The rest of this speculation and the politics and the intrigue is all nice, but frankly, it's irrelevant at the end of the day to the people of the state. They're not really concerned with who sits where, you know, what is succession. I don't plan on dying anytime soon. If I do pass away, I don't believe Bob Duffy will have passed away just at about the same period of time. So I'm not really worried about the succession. I'm worried about, do they perform for the people of the state? We had a relatively successful 2 years, a highly successful past 2 years compared to the past performance of the state Senate. I want to make sure we have a functioning body, and then how they vote. And here's the report card, Jimmy, and I gave them literally the issues that are important to the people of this state.
On this topic, if I may, there are 2 court cases ongoing for 2 of the races, one involving Ms. Kochik and Assemblyman George Amador, another Terry Gibson, Neil DiCarlo, Steve Saland in the Hudson Valley. In 2010, you asked Chief Judge Lippman, you were Attorney General at the time, to expedite the court hearings. Are you satisfied with the pace of this counting, and are you at all concerned about any possible consequences if there are no winners certified in these 2 districts?
If there were any stalling tactics, Jimmy, I would have no problem making the same point to the judge again. My guess is he remembers my letter from the last election, and my guess is he remembers the point, which is make the determinations quickly so you can see the body and you can proceed. I don't know if the margin makes a difference now with this new arrangement, but my point is the same.
Have you seen stalling tactics?
I haven't, but that's what you're suggesting.
Governor, what does next year look like at this point? I mean, you must be budgeting and have a plan out. What do you think next year is going to look like?
The big question, Mike, is, which we don't have the answer to, is has there been any effect on the revenues for the state by Sandy? We did a mid-year budget report that said we were basically where we were. But that was really before the Sandy economic consequences, if there are any. The week after the storm, there were 46,000 new unemployment claims. That number has trailed off week to week. But there's a big question, has there been an effect? And by the way, whoever you talk to, some people think it's going to be de minimis, some people think it could be significant, some people think if there's a supplemental and we do get additional funding and the private insurance companies start to pay claims, that's going to be an infusion into the economy. So the truth is we don't know. That would be the largest unknown factor for next year. What does the budget look like? What does the deficit look like?
On that point, I don't know if it's changed, but your tax department, maybe DOB, does get weekly reports on sales tax receipts, income tax. How is it tracking in the month after this storm versus a year ago? What are the numbers you're
There hasn't been a significant variance that would make a difference for our projections, plus or minus, but we're watching it carefully.
So that's good news.
That's good news.
Governor,
But good news is fleeting in this place, Tom, so you want to check it every day.
Back to Nick at the end. Nick.
Governor, getting back to the state senate, just how do you envision your style of governance changing, if at all? How do you expect to interact with Senators Klein and Skelos now that they're kind of elevated to equal status in the chamber?
I don't know. I'll ask them. On Jimmy's question before, I didn't fill out the rest of, I didn't answer the rest of the question. On the internal mechanisms and how they run the chamber, that is up to them. And I'll be open to their suggestions. They say they're going to alternate leadership. I don't know how they think that's going to work vis-a-vis myself or vis-a-vis the other house, but I'm sure they'll tell me how they want us to interface.
Governor.
I'm sorry, Nick?
Have you spoken with them?
I had my first conversation, I spoke to Senator Klein yesterday after the announcement, because I wanted to understand exactly what it meant and what they were saying.
Governor, on the Court of Appeals, Judge Kaye has submitted 7 names to you to replace Judge Separak upon her retirement.
Yes.
How soon do you have to make a decision, and are you considering anyone else other than the names that she has submitted, Judge Kaye has submitted?
Yeah, we have a few weeks and we're going through the list.
A few weeks, you have to do it before the 1st of January?
We have to do what is the final date? I think it's January 15th. Yeah, I think it's the mid-January.
Governor, what's your thought of the argument that's being made that the best way to get Democratic, quote-unquote, progressive bills through the Senate is not to let the Democrats be in charge of the Senate, but to have like this bipartisan coalition in charge of the Senate, again, to pass Democratic bills?
Well, that gets to I don't know. Look, I really don't know. That's why I'm saying I want to wait and see, because you have all sorts of arguments now. You have some people saying, well, this is going to be a highly functional body, and it will be more functional this way. You have some people saying, well, it's going to be less functional because you have this bifurcated leadership. I don't know. I don't know. Obviously, I want what the people of the state want, which is a government body that operates, that conducts itself professionally. We've seen the alternative, and it was terrible. So does this accomplish that? I don't know. I don't know that anybody knows. I don't know that they know. I get the concept, but we have to see how it actually works in practice. And if it functions well, that's the first question, right? Does it function? Second question is, did you vote on the bills that are important to the people of this state? And did they pass or did they not pass? Did the minimum wage go up or did it not? Did you pass campaign finance or did you not? And if you didn't pass campaign finance, then I think you failed the people of the state. If you don't raise the minimum wage, I think you failed the people of the state. And that's what my op-ed is about. Here's the report card. Here are the questions before. And you tell me the answers to those 10 questions, plus functionality, and I'll tell you my opinion about this arrangement.
There's more certainty now with the leadership. Have you given any other thought to bringing them back for a special session before the end of the year?
No. By the way, they say that my agenda items are their top agenda items. That's what they have said, right? They say they're going to vote on these issues. Now, I know the Republicans don't support them. But theoretically, the Democrats plus the IDC can pass them. So if the Democrats support it and the IDC supports it, then these items should pass. I believe they said yesterday they'll come to the floor. Well, then if they come to the floor, and if the IDC does what they say they're going to do, and if the Democrats do what they say they're going to do, these items will pass.
Democrats, to be fair, the Democrats say it's going to depend what the bill is. If it's a watered-down version of campaign finance reform or a increase in the minimum wage that's either too low or doesn't include an escalate and indexing, then they may not go for it, they say.
Well, then we'll have that discussion. But they say they want to raise the minimum wage, right? That's what they say. So we will see. At one point, you will have answers to the questions because you'll actually have the clarity of consequence. It will work or it won't work. They'll vote or they won't vote.
In that same outstanding op-ed, you said that the Democratic majority, in the Times-Union,
yes,
in print tomorrow, but you said that the Democratic majority didn't achieve any significant reform legislation during their time in control of the chamber. Some pointed to Rockefeller drug law reform. Do you think, that was a big issue for you going back years, do you think more needs to be done on reforming those laws, the vestiges of them, or do you think that might have been...
Casey, I think it was a squandered opportunity. I think they could have done a lot more. Rockefeller drug laws, you're right, they passed Rockefeller drug laws. They could have passed a lot more. You know, you had people waiting decades for a Democratic Senate. Decades. And this was going to be, finally, the explosion of progressive action because the Republicans had stymied it for so long. That's where we were, right? All those years, we had the Republican Senate, and there was a backlog of progressive measures that were not being passed, and then the Democrats won. And by the way, you had a Democratic Senate, you had a Democratic Assembly, you had a Democratic governor. It was supposed to be the golden moment of progressive politics and progressive action. And I think that was a lost moment. I also say, in my well-written, poetic, slightly humorous op-ed in the Times-Union, the Republicans stymied progressive action for decades. And then stymied it last year also. So my point was there is ample criticism on both sides and ample reason for me not to get involved in this internal debate and take this position. I will wait and see what you actually do. And let's see the product. I get all the conceptual arguments. Let's see how it works and what you do. And then I'll render an opinion, and to the extent the people of the state of New York care about what I say, they'll listen or they won't listen.
Dovetailing off of what? Just over $20 billion in state aid funding. Next year it's expected to increase over $21 billion. In about a half hour there's going to be a large number of protesters here that are wanting more state aid. What do you say to those who say that there's not enough state aid right now, even though, despite those increases from the state?
For what particular area?
In general, they're saying that there's a property tax cap hindering their ability to raise funds, plus a lack of funding.
But the protesters are from what area? They're what type of protesters?
Schools.
Oh, school protesters. Look, education funding went up 4% this year. 4% is a lot of money. That is a very, very large increase. What else in your life has gone up 4%? Most people's income hasn't gone up 4%. Their home value hasn't gone up 4%. Their savings account hasn't gone up 4%. That is a significant increase. And at one point, you can't get water out of a stone. And if they're saying, well, we should raise taxes higher in this state to fund more than a 4% increase in education, I disagree.
Governor, kind of going back to Mike's question from earlier about how
Mike
next
did
year's...
have the best question today, let's be honest.
That's why I'm taking it. But do you see next year being more complicated than the start of years past from the last 2 years from when you started? Do you see it being more complicated, more problematic? Do you feel like you'll have to be improvising more?
I don't know that it could get any more complicated than it has been, to tell you the truth. I think the first year was probably the most complicated just in terms of the $10 billion deficit, the many years of chaos that preceded, and the cultural issues, right? There was a culture of dysfunction when we walked in the door. I believe that. So you were trying to change a culture. You had a tremendous budget deficit. You were new. You were trying to recruit a team. They were walking into agencies that they were unfamiliar with. I think the first year was probably the most challenging. Not to say that second year didn't have challenges, and this third year will definitely have challenges. You tend to focus on the Senate. To me, you know, whether I talk to one person in the Senate or I talk to two people in the Senate, isn't going to really change the way I spend my day. For next year, the revenues, which is Mike's question, that's a question mark. That could make a significant difference. The supplemental from the federal government, what do we get, if anything, and how can we best use that? You know, and these are very big dollars we're talking about on the federal supplemental. You know, we tend to throw around billions, but it's a lot of money. How do we start down this path of anticipating extreme weather? And how does that change our behavior, and what should we be doing now? We have a lot of work to do on emergency response. I said that after Irene. I'm saying it after Sandy, because once you accept these things are going to happen, this is an emergency preparedness system like we have never anticipated before. So those are going to be the types of challenges that I'm worried about. We have to keep the upstate economy going. Western New York, we have big initiatives underway, $1 billion for Buffalo. But those are the complications that I would be looking towards.
Governor, last in that well-written piece in the first publication.
It was heavily edited, I want you to know. I complain about my editor.
The litmus test line that you use, you talk about these 10 items. Can a legislator have a legitimate disagreement with you on a social issue like abortion or casino expansion and not draw your opposition to that?
Yes. Yeah, but I think, Tom, I think I've shown that. I understand, I respect a vote of conscience. You disagree with me, it's a matter of conscience, it's a matter of belief, it's a matter of ideology. Fine. So, you know, litmus test, it's 10. These are the 10 issues that are important, but I get that there are differences. I've had differences with both houses, both sessions, dramatic differences, right?
Maybe they should edit the article a little more then.
Governor, you said...
Trying to see the headline they write. Who writes the headline?
You had said that Rockefeller drug law reform was a squandered opportunity.
No, I didn't say that.
Perhaps I misheard, but my question was a slight derivation
of that. It was a squandered opportunity. Their leadership moment, that we could have done more in that moment, and that moment was a squandered opportunity. Rockefeller reform, I said, was a good thing, but that doesn't justify the entire leadership moment that came after decades of waiting.
Very well. I was going to ask if you've thought at all about the medicalization of marijuana or perhaps the outright legitimization of marijuana. We're seeing that in California and Oregon.
We are considering that. I haven't changed my position.
Can you remind me what your position is?
Not in favor of it.
Governor, on hydrofracking, last week we saw the DEC move for a 90-day extension on its proposed regulations rather than restart the regulatory process. Should that be viewed as the state getting ready to issue a decision in 90 days?
What would you say, Joe?
I'd say we are waiting for the Department of Health's report, and until the Department of Health reports, we won't make any decision.
Do you anticipate that coming, I mean, the contracts for the outside reviewers are through mid-February. Do you anticipate that coming back before the deadline and making a decision before that end of February deadline?
We hope so.
So you hope that a decision will be made before the end of February?
Yes.
Governor, you said you talked to Senator Klein yesterday. What did he tell you?
Basically, after the statement came out, and although it was a very well-written statement, and I thought it should have been published in the Times-Union also, I just wanted to have a conversation with him to understand what their position was, what this meant.
Did you communicate with him at all before he announced this?
It's the first time I've spoken to him in a while.
Him, your aides, his aides, were you aware of this plan at all?
Well, I read your articles, so I was aware something was in the works. But look, my people talk to all sides, if you will. That's their job, sort of like what you do. You talk to everyone all the time. You take everything with a grain of salt. But we have not taken a side, and I want to see how it works. And if this works well, God bless. And if it works well for the people of the state, and it functions, and they're voting, and we're moving forward, great. If we have a dysfunctional period, that is not going to be a good thing, and I will do everything I can to change that. Let's take one more question.
Governor, perhaps maybe better for Tom Madison. How heavily does the selection committee's recommendation on the Tappan Z weigh into the Thruway Authority's final decision on the contract?
The board now has the option to choose from among those three proposals, but I think it plays a heavy role in the decision-making process. This was a large and very unique selection committee. There were more than 80 people, experts from various state agencies and authorities that have experience in design build and major projects that helped analyze the best value proposal. At the governor's direction, the selection committee was expanded to include people that had a sense of aesthetics and a whole range of different experts, very unique selection process. So all of those different technical factors were very well considered before even the price was known, and that was a condition of the procurement process. So we already had a concept from the selection committee that this was the preferred proposal. And then when the price envelopes were opened, it was significantly less than the other two proposals as well. So I would say it has a significant bearing on ultimately what the decision of the board will be. However, the board is open to choose any of those options.
Right. It's technically non-binding, right?
When the president came here after Sandy, he promised that he would be there with whatever New York needed. Do you think if he does come up significantly short of the money you're seeking, that's a betrayal of his promise?
Let's see what they do first, and then we'll characterize it. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. Characterize it before. I know.